This program and its contents are designed for information and educational purposes only. This program does not render medical advice or professional services and is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. The information provided here should not be used for the purposes of diagnosing or treating a medical or psychiatric condition. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, consult your healthcare provider.
Hi, and welcome to Positive Momentum TV. Today we have Joe Schwartzberger again, and we're going to talk about flying, and as you can see, we have something on the wing. We're talking about, again, flying and fear of flying and how to overcome them. You know, people want to, I'm one that's a prior phobic, recovering phobic, whatever you want to call it, and I'm learning to get over my fears. And one of the things that helped me get fearful was Twilight Zone the movie, or Airplane the movie, Airport the movie, not Airplane. Airplane was too funny, but Airport the movie. And one of the things was, as Joe can attest, is that, and most of us have seen Twilight Zone, was it? That they did that segment where there was something tearing, tearing something off there, and Captain Kirk, thank you. William Shatner was in there. Something is on the wing. So, Joe, would you kind of run with this, because I'm really messing it up.
Well, there's a lot of mystery to aviation, especially commercial aviation. We've got these really big, impressive aircraft, and when you're not involved in aviation, you don't see what goes into getting that aircraft to safely do its job. And
right.
Because of that mystery, a lot of people just, when they have anxiety or when they're afraid of flying, it's because they don't understand it.
Right. I will give you that.
There's all kinds of horror stories, of course, and yes, it's a man-made thing. There's people involved, so there's always going to be a chance that something non-normal or outside of the norm happens that becomes an emergency. But that's why we train for those. That's why there's support for the pilots. They've got the ground crews, they've got air traffic control, they've got the maintenance people working day and night sometimes to keep the aircraft safe, make sure it's up to specs and ready to do its job. Because when it really boils down to it, everyone involved in making that aircraft go from Epley to Cincinnati is, they want that to be successful, they want that to be safe. I mean, they don't get to do their job anymore if they were ignoring stuff like that. Right.
And as we touched on, as I touched on a minute ago, some of the, the movie industry,
sensationalizes everything.
They sensationalize, and so does the news, So it's like, oh my God, this happened, and everybody and their brother hears about it, and they play it over and play it over, and so we saturated with this. Just because there's a 20-car pileup on the interstate, you hear about it maybe once, and that's it. So, and they say that, and you've proved to me, that traveling by car is more dangerous than flying. We talked about this when I was going to Arizona last year. I texted you saying, okay, tell me again, because this is freaking me out, because I have anticipatory anxiety, which means my brain will come up with every reason not to go, and it's not just my brain. I will just go into almost a panic mode. And I've learned how to fly. I know pilots. I know you guys. I know what it takes to be a pilot and how much maintenance the aircraft. But it's still
something that affects. Yeah.
There's still that anxiety. So when I texted you, you came back and you said, these pilots, this is what they've done for their whole lives. They want to get home to their families. And if you go by car, you got people texting, and the pilots aren't going to be texting. And yes, we've heard on the news where pilot fell asleep and he overshot Minnesota by an hour. Did anybody get hurt? No, you were delayed by an hour because the car has the plane had autopilot and everything else. You fall asleep behind the wheel of a car, you have a 20-car pileup on the interstate, and how many people are dead? Yeah. And after you sent me that text, we were going to the airport. I'm driving. My husband's going, no, let's at least not, rule out flying. And as we're going to the airport, this person is texting in their car on the interstate next to us. I'm going, okay, yeah, flying is the best way to go. So
it really is the safest. I mean, if you really think about it, we hear about the incidents and the accidents and the tragedies because that's what makes the news money.
Right.
It's just a fact. It's the way it is. What we don't hear about is the thousands upon thousands of successful flights that happen every day.
Right.
And all across the world. I mean, not just in the U.S. We got international flights. We've got airlines overseas that they're doing the same thing, and all of them have one goal in mind: safely complete the flight.
Mm-hmm. And the next goal is to make money, and they can't make money if they don't safely complete those flights.
Exactly.
Because people aren't going to buy tickets for planes that notoriously are, accidents, or the pilots aren't trained well, or the pilots are overworked, or when we go to amusement parks, we go for this sense of danger, but it's a controlled environment. We know we're not truly in danger, but there's that little bit of element of fear because, oh my God, I'm 150 feet in the air. So we'll pay for that, but we're not going to pay for true. Oh, go ahead, kill me. Be done with this. So if you could kind of maybe enlighten us a little bit, I don't know what are the most questions we've asked. We know when we get on a plane, oh, the lights dim. From what I understand, when the lights dim, it's just that they're unplugging from regular power and going to the aircraft's power. Is this correct?
Yeah, it's an aircraft, just like your car, is going to be, it needs a source of electrical energy to operate all the lights and bells and whistles and everything and all the instruments. And when it's on the ground and everyone's boarding, they're not going to be trying to run it off batteries or run it off a generator in the aircraft, because that's using the resources that you want to keep on the aircraft to actually fly. So it's plugged into a power generator. There's several different kinds, but it's plugged in on the ground so that they can run the air conditioning. They can have the lights up and everything while people are boarding and getting settled. The last thing you want is the aircon to be off when you're on a really hot day and people are cramming into this aircraft.
Right.
It just makes it uncomfortable and no one's enjoying themselves. So of course, when they unplug it, there's going to be a voltage change, and that's normal. So the lights will dim a little bit. You might hear a few different noises. It's completely normal. It's just they're getting ready to transition to the aircraft being untethered to the ground.
Okay. And are there any other, we mostly know, okay, there's that thunk when the gear goes up.
Yeah.
But there's one phenomena that happens that kind of freaks me out every time we fly. We take off, we're cruising, we're climbing, and then suddenly it feels like the plane's slowing down. We're like, I'm assuming that means they're pulling the flaps in or whatever they're doing.
Well, it depends on what the phase of flight is. When you get that deceleration motion, it's because they are slowing down for one reason or another. It could be they've hit the speed limit. It could be there's
a speed limit. Okay, wait a minute. Back up. Hold on. There's a speed limit?
Below a certain altitude, close to airports, there's a 200-knot speed limit, so that when you're in that environment, that airport environment, there's a lot of aircraft there. There's always going to be aircraft there because that's where aircraft go, is airports.
Okay.
So they're all converging. You've got people trying to leave. You've got people coming in. So we slow things down to give more reaction time, to give more time to sort things out and get planes going where they need to go safely and keep them away from each other.
Okay.
Because the last thing you want is to get too close to another airplane in an unplanned way. I mean, we're not talking formation flying.
Right.
That's a completely different ball game, and people train for that specifically. Just passenger aircraft aren't designed, and that's not their mission to fly that close to each other.
Okay.
So when you feel that deceleration, they're slowing down.
Okay.
It could be because there's an aircraft in front of them they're giving space to. It could be they've reached 200 knots and the air traffic control hasn't cleared them to go faster. It could be that they're setting their power setting to a cruise setting and they were a little faster beforehand. So they're just going to ease the power back and go, okay, this is the speed we're going to go for the trip. Maybe they got a little fast. It happens.
Okay.
It's nothing to worry about.
Well, and that's good to know because, most of us who are untrained, even with my training, and I am not a certified pilot or, licensed pilot, but I did have, several hours of training. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's almost, anyway. So that's just something that, in a trainer, we don't do. We don't, because we're not going that fast to begin with. So when you get into commercial, like United or Southwest or whoever, and you're taking off and suddenly, they're slowing down, we're going, what the heck? So, it's good to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other things that we can talk about that are maybe helpful for the average flyer, people who don't have an aviation background, or, I know maybe we can use the board to kind of get some demonstrations of airflow, or when we were doing ground school, you used a lot of, and that's why the board's here, by the way, is in case, other than something is on the wing. I'm changing directions.
No worries.
Okay.
I know a lot of people that aren't familiar with air travel, aren't familiar with the aircraft. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of weird noises. And if you fly in any aircraft and you look out over the wing while you're flying, you'll see it flex a little bit. All of that's normal and in the normal operation of the aircraft. The reason it does that is, well, the atmosphere is not a constant. I mean, it's constantly here, but we have wind. Right. We have thermals, which is just solar, the sun heats it, solar radiation heats the ground, and it's like a convection or a convection oven.
Yes.
So that heat rises back up, and it feels kind of like speed bumps, and it's normal. The main reason why pilots will ask you to keep your seatbelt on in a flight when you're sitting down in the chair and everything seems calm and nothing's exciting. You could hit one of those speed bumps, and we don't want you to hit your head and get hurt.
Right.
It's really that simple. It's not we want you to be stuck to your seat and not move around at all. Okay. That's going to take place. You got to go to the restroom. You want to stretch your legs, especially on those long flights, a little bit. But it's a lot of keeping you safe.
And
is the whole reason for it.
So real quick, you mentioned turbulent, and you mentioned speed bumps, which is basically a turbulence.
It's turbulence.
Yeah, and one of the things I liken it to is, when I hit a bump on the ground when I'm driving, and I learn how to talk, is I call them ground turbulence. And sometimes we were chased out. We talked about this last time. We were chased out of the East Coast by Hurricane Irene, and it was one bumpy trip. And basically we were on a washboard road all the way back, and some of those were pretty deep. So would you kind of just briefly cover turbulence, and people look at the flex of the wing going, oh my God, the plane's going to break apart. Let's kind of debunk that. We know they're still unsettling, but they're not dangerous. Would you kind of elaborate on that?
You got to bear in mind first that when you're going through turbulence, the plane itself, the weight and mass of the plane, it takes more energy to move a big commercial plane than it does a smaller aircraft. So it's going to feel different. If someone's got experience going on commercial travel, I still try and explain it that, hey, it might be a little bumpy. Well, if they just landed and they're like, well, it wasn't bumpy when I landed, in 5 minutes they hop in a small aircraft and we're bouncing all over the place. It's because the plane is lighter, it takes less energy to move it.
Right.
The reason it can feel so, I guess, disconcerting, or you get that jump in your stomach, is because it's not really moving much more than a car would in most cases, but the car is on a suspension system connected to the ground, so it's got it can only travel so far back down. The airplane is going through the atmosphere, doesn't have the ground, it's not rolling on the wheels, so it hits the updraft from the thermals. That's I'll try and write it out here for you. That'll work. So, like I said, just a little bit. The sun is throwing its rays down. It's heating up everything, and different things. Let's say this is make that a building, and say we've got a forest over here with some happy little trees. There.
Yeah.
And maybe we got a swimming pool or an ocean or water over here. So all of these different surfaces, they absorb heat at different rates, and they give off that or radiate that heat at a different rate. So over here with all this concrete, we might have a lot of heat coming back up. Here with the trees and stuff, we don't have that much, and even less over the ocean. So as the plane is flying, through the air, it doesn't care what's underneath it. It really doesn't. It's not connected in any way to the ground. But all of this stuff rising at different rates affect it.
Okay.
And it's all it is the heat rising creates these thermals. And you'll go up with them, and then you'll come out of it, and you'll go down a little bit, and it feels like you're kind of on a roller coaster sometimes.
Gotcha.
And it's perfectly safe. The pilots, if they get into a bad patch of it, they'll either divert. They're constantly talking to other pilots and other ATC facilities to get information ahead of them of, hey, this 747 just went through this area and reported moderate to severe turbulence. So everyone else in a 747 or smaller aircraft is going, well, maybe we can divert a little bit around that. More comfortable for the passengers. It's safer for the airplane. It's just we all talk to each other that way. I mean, you'll see PIREPs is what they're called, or pilot reports.
Okay.
And you'll see some of them from Cessnas all the way up to the big boys in the 747s, and that they always tell you what type of aircraft is in the pilot report, because if it is a turbulence report, obviously the Cessna, well, if they got bounced around a lot, severe to them might be, it doesn't even move or bump the 747.
Gotcha. Well, that's very helpful for many of us. And then one of the other things I've noticed is when I get on an aircraft, especially after training, is how much it takes to learn to fly. You talked about Cessna versus 737, 747. If you could briefly go over what it takes to learn how to fly this plane, and how, just because I know how to fly this plane, does that mean I can fly this one?
Well, everyone that's starting out to learn how to fly, you're starting in what we call training aircraft, or aircraft conducive to training. They're going to be very simple. There's not a lot of extra bells and whistles. There's not a lot of extra controls in them. It's very easy to grasp because you're focusing on the decision making, mitigating risk, so it's a lot of mental. And then when you're in the actual aircraft, you want it to be simple because you're mastering the skill of moving your hands and your feet in concert with each other to control the direction of the aircraft safely. You're learning to manage the engine and the power and everything. As you get into bigger and bigger aircraft, they become more and more complex. For example, a Cessna 172, it has a mixture control, which controls the air-fuel mixture to the engine, and it has a throttle. That's it. So you can go or you can go faster until you can't go any faster.
Right.
You get up to, say, something as complex as a 777 or a 747, the big airlines. If you've ever seen a picture of their cockpit, they are massively surrounded by circuit breakers and switches and controls and information stations. Those systems are so complex that it takes several weeks and weeks of training and reoccurrent training to understand how they all work and interpret their signals so that you can safely operate the aircraft. We all saw the 777 that hit the birds as it went into the engine, and they ended up into the Hudson River.
Right.
That air crew was so well trained and so in tune with the systems of that aircraft that they were able to complete a emergency water landing safely that check was designed to be started up at 30,000 feet, not 1,500 feet.
Right.
They were able to maintain that professionalism and do the job as a crew to get down safe as possible. I understand that the pilot in command knew the system so well that he understood the angle he needed to hold the aircraft's nose to glide properly to the safe distance was beyond the safety systems for that aircraft. In other words, he was going to have to hold it at an angle that the computer would say, hey, you're not supposed to do that, because in normal flight that would cause a stall. What a stall is the air stops contacting the wing properly and you start descending at a significant rate. You're no longer flying at that point.
Right.
He knew that he needed to override that for just a few moments to maintain the proper angle to get down into the water without hurting anybody. And he did a magnificent job. We've all seen the interviews. Yeah. It's one of those stories that you're just, for pilots, we're just like, right on, that's awesome. I want to be that proficient at my aircraft.
You know, and knowing that the pilots strive for that.
Oh yeah.
It's very helpful. I know when I walk on an aircraft, you know, and I see the pilot, I'm like, oh my God, you had to go through so much training, and there's no room for error, and you have a family you want to go home to. You may have had a bad day, but you're still not wanting to do anything. You know, you're going to do everything you can to get us safely there, and you're not going to say this is an aircraft until you believe it's an aircraft. Oh. And would you mind elaborating on that phrase? Because a lot of people who have not been around aviation don't understand that the pilot's the one that determines this is an aircraft. If this thing is sitting on the ground, it's not an aircraft until the pilot declares it one. So if you could kind of...
Every pilot in command and every air crew for the bigger aircraft, we have to inspect, and we want to inspect the aircraft before each flight. Some call it just a walk around. It's commonly denoted as a pre-flight. What we're doing is we're checking everything we possibly can to make sure that we don't see anything that's broken. We don't see anything that's going to hamper the safe operation of that aircraft, because it's the last chance you have to say, we can go fly. Mm-hmm. If you're just walking around the aircraft and all of a sudden, oh, look, there's something leaking there. Well, you need to investigate it, and oh, look, it looks like we've got a hydraulic leak or something. Well, now we can't use that aircraft. Better to find that on the ground than in the air. Mm-hmm. So they do thorough pre-flights before each flight. You'll see them if you're at an airfield. Look outside and you'll see people walking around the aircraft. You'll see people opening up compartments and hatches and looking, going to a list and checking things off. They're going through and walking around to make sure that that aircraft is in fact going to fly properly.
And it doesn't matter that aircraft just touched down and is just doing a turnaround flight.
No.
Every time that plane leaves the ground, it has to be certified or okayed by the pilot in command.
Yeah, the air crew goes through their checklist, approved for that aircraft, and certifies it, yes, this is in fact still an airplane.
So we're getting close to time where we're kind of wrapping up. Are there any questions that you've heard or anything that we could kind of inform our viewers on, what debunking the mystery of flying, or how, any questions that they have that you may think they might have, we can answer, or,
I think the biggest thing I would put at this point would be, you got to remember, in these airlines, you've got 2 people minimum in the cockpit working in tandem as a team to complete that flight. Your captain is going to have the most experience, and your first officer is going to be not only learning from that captain, but helping him, because we are all human. We do make mistakes, but if you've got 2 people working together, you can catch each other's mistakes before they become a big problem. Right. Other than that, the aviation industry as a whole, the top topic on everybody's mind when they go into work or when they go to a seminar, the biggest thing everyone discusses is safety. because we are all learning, constantly learning, better ways to mitigate the risk of flying and make it safer for everyone involved.
Good. That's wonderful to know. I mean, you know, we've heard about, you know, air disasters, and I hate to use even that's over. It's not that it's not a disaster, but it's no more of a disaster than a 20-car pileup. You know, and you know, I hate to downplay either one, but you know, when air travel is involved, the media gets a hold of it, and really, you know, those of us who are already apprehensive, okay, we're anxious, we you know, you know, we don't want to fly because, oh my God, you know, and part of it is claustrophobia. That, you know, that's a whole other show. But, you know, and I'm hoping that what Joe has shared and how, you know, what he's demonstrated has helped at least take some of the mystery out of flying. And you know, if you have any questions, or you know, we can bring Joe back on. And you know, and we're going to have other pilots as well, and maybe we can even, you know, take the hero and go out and do a flight. So if you have any questions or want any more information, have any topics, go ahead and contact us at inquiry@positivemomentum.net, or you can check us out on Gmail. We're at positivemomentumtv@gmail.com, and we're also going to be on YouTube. And this show will be available for people to watch, because you know, you never know when you're going to go somewhere, and you know, you're going to want some information. And like I said, we have access to pilots, and you know, Joe's a great pilot. I mean, maybe we can go up in the air one day and, you know, kind of videotape that, and you know, or, sorry, videotape. You know, I'm dating myself. So, and Joe, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, and I would love to have you back and we can talk some more. This is a topic that we could, you know, we could cover so much for general population.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to help us all. So
No
thank you
worries.
again.
You're welcome.
And I hope you come back. And thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you again on the next show.